Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to talk to you guys. And like he mentioned, if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm down here at Muller Sports Psych. And I also want to mention, I think your coach mentions, if you have questions, instead of asking them as we go ahead and put them in chat. And then at the end, your coach is going to help me out by selecting a few to ask me. Okay, there we go. So back up one. So how I got here is my love for swimming. I swam competitively from age 6 through college, and back then there really wasn't any swimming after college, so I stopped at that point. But I have a real passion for sports and for athletics, and I love seeing athletes excel. And I do continue to mainly work with swimmers because of my understanding of the sport and because of my love for the sport, although I do work with other athletes as well. I understand what your training is like. I understand what the competitions are like. I competed at the age group level, the NC2A level, and at the international level. And I work with athletes in all those different levels as well. I studied and swam at Stanford, and then I became an attorney and practiced law for several years. And while I liked it, I missed being involved with athletes. And so I went back to school so that I could get a therapy degree. And then I got additional training in brain spotting, which is a neuro-experiential method of creating lasting change, neuroplasticity of the brain. And also EFT and acupoint tapping method that's similar to acupoint, or what's the word, acupuncture, but we don't use needles, we use fingers, and you use the tapping to create lasting change. We currently have 3 golden retrievers. These 2 are ours. We inherited the 3rd one. So our house is quite full of dogs at the moment. So I just wanted to tell you a little story about how working with a sports psych or a performance coach can help an athlete. I started working with Carson Foster last year. He had developed a reputation for swimming really fast at small meets or at the prelims at the big meets, but falling short in the finals when it counted. And the most disappointing example of this, let me just move this over a little. Oh, shoot. Hang on one second. Come back. It's not coming back. Where did it go?
So I think Susannah, you will have to reshare. So you have to
reshare.
Yeah. If you open another window.
Does that work?
No, not yet. We can see your slides. That's what we see, the slide about Carson Foster.
Okay, that's where we want to be.
Oh, okay,
it's just blocking. Let me move this instead of that. There we go. Okay, so I was talking about Carson and how he could swim fast in the prelims, but then when he got to the finals, he would swim slower. And the most disappointing example of that for him was at the Olympic trials in 2021. He was leading the 400 IM with 100 meters to go, and then he was passed by Chase Kalish and Jay Litherland, and he ended up getting 3rd and not making the team. And what was really hard for him to take was that his time was slower in finals than it had been in prelims. And if he had just gone that time, he would have made the Olympic team. Then a few weeks later, he swam the 400 IM at a sectionals meet, and he actually swam the fastest time of the year in the 400 IM, a time that would have won the gold medal in Tokyo. So we began working together last year in January, and then in April of 2022 at the World Championship Trials, which is similar to the Olympic trials in a non-Olympic year, Carson won the A final of the 400 IM. So he defeated Chase Kalish, he defeated Jay Litherland, both of whom beat him at the Olympic trials and who were the gold and silver medalists at the Olympics. So he also qualified for the team in some other events. He swam well in his 200 IM and his 200 free, making that relay by getting 3rd place. So in each of those events, he excelled in the finals, which is where he had struggled before, when all the pressure was on and when a lot of people expected him to fail. He continued this trend, doing really well in the finals at World Championships, and he got 2 silvers in his individual events and a gold in the relay. He continued this at the short course worlds this past December, and went best times in the finals in all of his events, again, earning 2 silvers and a gold, and it was also a world record. So why does working with a sports psych or performance coach help you? It's because of the mind-body connection. The mind-body connection is a 2-way communication system between our brain and nervous system and the body. It is physical, electrical, and biochemical. And in fact, more information actually flows from your gut to your brain than in reverse. So it's really one, the system of the body and the brain. Our goal using mindset is to get you into your optimal performance zone, which is right here, this excitement curve here at the top. That's where you're going to perform at your best. It is a physical, emotional, and mental activation. And some people are going to fall more on this excited towards anxious side. Some people are going to fall more on the calm side, but you don't want to be too low here. That's not usually too much of a problem. But what happens for most people is they end up over here in what they're calling the stress zone, or what I would call performance anxiety. So a few things that, I mentioned you can be as an individual, you might be here and another individual might be here. So each individual is a little different within the curve of optimal performance. And it also depends on the task that you're facing. So you need to be at a different place, maybe if you're a 50 free, rather than if you're swimming the 1,000 free. You might need to be more amped up for the sprint, a little less amped up for a distance event. So how do you know if you've found that optimal zone? Well, sometimes we're underactivated, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here because this isn't usually a problem, but it's when you have that sort of don't care attitude, when you're not really excited, you're not really interested, you're not at the best place physically and mentally to swim well. This is what we usually see, which they call the overactivated zone or performance anxiety. This is something I see a lot with athletes. It's athletes who tend to put a lot of pressure on themselves, perfectionists, overthinkers, analytical people, or it might be that it's a pressure situation, a taper meet that you've been working toward all season, for example. You might feel jittery or your stomach might be queasy. Sometimes people even throw up. Ryan Murphy was known for throwing up when he was growing up. Or in an extreme case, you might even have a panic attack. And some of you might know who Kevin Love is, up at Cleveland Cavaliers, basketball player. He actually got a panic attack while playing and had to leave the court. He described that panic attack as feeling I was running from room to room, like I was looking for something I couldn't find. Really, I was just hoping my heart would stop racing. It was like my body was trying to say to me, you're about to die. I ended up on the floor in the training room, lying on my back, trying to get enough air to breathe. So hopefully you guys aren't getting to the extreme level there like he did where you're actually having a panic attack, but you might notice some of those symptoms, feeling like your heart is racing, feeling like you're having a hard time breathing. Those are big cues that you're having performance anxiety. So what are the signs when you're at that optimal activation? This is the zone where you're going to feel excited and confident. It's not that you're not going to be nervous. You are likely to have some nervousness, but it's not going to cross over into anxious. And for instance, you might have some butterflies in your stomach, but you're not feeling nauseous and like you're going to throw up. Your heart rate might be increased a bit, but it's not so hard you feel like you're having that panic attack like Kevin Love. So Michael Phelps is a great example for optimal activation. He knew how to get himself into that zone. And for him, he would listen to rap music before his races. But I've had other athletes who have realized listening to rap music actually makes them feel anxious. And so you have to figure out what's right for you. One of the things I work with athletes on is developing a high performance mindset. And today we're going to go over the first 3 steps to develop a high performance mindset. We're going to first look at challenge versus threat perception. And then we're going to look at process focus versus outcome focus and how that affects the challenge versus threat perception. And then finally, we're going to spend some time on the value of a growth mindset. As we work through the presentation, I'll be explaining what mindset works to help you perform better, especially in pressure situations. But the key is that you are going to have to do the work. You've been thinking a certain way all your life, and it's going to take effort and time to change that. You're going to have to pay attention to your thoughts and make the effort to make them different. A little bit more detail here about some of the important physical changes that occur. So if you have that threat perception, you're going to feel anxious and you're more likely to make mistakes. You're going to have vasoconstriction, meaning you're going to have less blood flow out to the muscles, bringing oxygen to the muscles. And you're going to have constricted airflow, meaning that you're not going to have as much oxygen flowing through your body. You're going to have glucose depletion, which means your energy will go down. In contrast, with a threat perception, you're not going to feel anxious. You're going to have more clear and focused thinking. You might have vasodilation, which is increased blood flow, which is helpful, and bronchodilation, meaning you'll get more oxygen and it'll get out to your muscles. You'll have glucose production, which means your energy will go up. So what does it mean to have a threat perception when we're talking about sports? A lot of the threat perception comes from fear. And a lot of time people don't even realize that that's what's going on because they just know that they're anxious or nervous, and the fear is really kind of under the surface. It's often a result of black and white thinking, like he talked about, win or lose, that kind of thinking. And here on the slide, succeed or fail, good or bad. The fear is often a fear of failure. And that means worrying that, if I don't do well, it'll be embarrassing. People will lose respect for me, or I'll let down my coach or my family, or feeling like you're a failure, or that you're not good enough, or feeling that others are going to judge you and decide that you're not good enough, or a fear of a lack of respect from your teammates or your coach. It could also be a fear of success. We don't see that quite as often, but sometimes people do have a fear of success. And what that looks like is too much will be expected of me. For example, if I make that juniors cut in the 100 back, everyone's going to expect me to make my juniors cut in the 200 back, and the 200 I am. And then maybe I have to move up a group at swimming, and I'm not ready to move up a group. So that could be fear of failure. It could also be, if you're really exceeding, it could be, I don't want to be in the spotlight. I'll be scrutinized. People will criticize me. Or perhaps if I move up a group, my old friends aren't going to like me anymore. Those are the kinds of things that constitute a threat perception. What happens to the body, to that mind-body connection when you have an athlete with a threat perception? The athlete is going to be naturally focused on the threat. That's part of our instinct for survival. We sense a threat, we focus on it. We focus on the possible negative consequences and how to protect ourselves from the threat. So what that looks like in the athlete is they're going to be thinking negatively. They're going to have worst case scenario thinking, and they're going to feel stressed and anxious. It includes thinking about maybe past failures or imagining worst outcome scenarios in the future. So their thoughts are not in the present moment, they're in the past or the future. The desire to flee the threat, that looks like not wanting to be there, not wanting to participate, in some cases, maybe even thinking about quitting. If you feel unsure that you can meet the demands of the task, then that looks like in the athlete self-doubt and loss of confidence. And that's what I hear a lot from athletes, is that they're confident up until they get to the meet, and then all of a sudden it deserts them. And if you note, the physical signs here are similar to that overactivation, because overactivation is usually due to a threat perception. So what happens when you have a challenge perception? That mind-body connection reacts very differently. And the key to having a challenge perception is that the athlete believes they are capable, maybe with a little stretch, but they're capable to meet or exceed their goal. It is within their reach. In contrast with the threat perception, the athlete perceives they are not capable of meeting the goal, and that's what makes it a threat. For challenge perception, the athlete is not fearing failure. There's no serious consequences to failure. Because they're not focused on the threat, they're more focused on the opportunity and the possibility of success. And the athlete is better able to manage their nerves. So there are still probably going to be some nerves, but it's going to be more like excitement, not anxious. And the thinking is more positive and optimistic. They're not afraid of failure. They see it as just simply part of the process. The heart rate may be increased, but it's not too much. It's that excitement level. Their thoughts are more in the present moment. Their body is ready to go. They're much more likely to be having fun, to be smiling, laughing, and enjoying the competition. So just a quick review. If you're at a meet and you're feeling anxious, ask yourself, C or T. Ask yourself, am I thinking in black and white terms? Am I afraid of some consequence? What are the physical sensations I am experiencing? And if you determine that you have a threat perception, what do you do next? Next, you want to look at process versus outcome thinking. How do you switch from threat to challenge? By changing your focus. So that video told us why it's so important, but he didn't really go into how do you do that in your own mind. The first step is changing what you're focusing on using process versus outcome thinking. And I know a lot of you have probably heard of process versus outcome mindset, but from my experience, most athletes don't really apply it. They're not actively directing their thoughts, and you need to do that if you want to switch your focus. So as it says on the slide there, if you're thinking about outcome, that's probably going to be a threat perception. And if you're thinking about process, that's probably going to be a challenge focus. So outcome focus means we're focusing on the result. Did I make this team or not? Did I get the cut or not? Did I get a best time or not? So see if you can see how that's all or nothing thinking. There's no in between. For example, I had a client whose goal was to break 24 seconds in the 50 free, and they dropped from a 24.82 to 24.01, and they burst into tears immediately. They didn't see the improvement. They only saw that they failed to break 24 seconds, even though it was only by 2/100ths. So that's just an example of black and white thinking. So if you are perceiving something as a threat, ask yourself, am I thinking about outcome? Is that what I'm focusing on? And as the slide says, swimming and most sports are very outcome focused. And it's not just the athletes, it's the parents and the coaches and everyone. So it is challenging to switch your focus. And you might even tell your coach or your parents to help support you in that and to not be so focused on outcome. There are other ways to identify threats too, which is if you notice in the language you're using to talk to yourself, you're using I have to, I should, I must, I need to. Those become demands when you're using that kind of language. And this is different from having a goal. So I'll read you some examples here. If you're saying, I am confident I can get my juniors cut. I am aiming for my juniors cut. I should get my juniors cut. So that last one there, the should get my juniors cut, has an implied, if I don't, I fail at the end there. And that's what creates the pressure. Now we'll look at how process focus is usually challenge perception. Process focus is all about how you execute your race. What technique and strategy do you want to use to swim your very best race? So it might be technique like I need to hold my line more, or I need to position my elbow in a certain way, or it might be I need to build tempo, or I need to maintain my stroke count, the last 50 of that 200, whatever it is for you. The way to keep yourself focused on process is to create process goals. Process goals are technique and strategy that you want to use to execute your race. So you think about your race and you come up with the key points of technique or strategy that you want to remember. You probably want 1 to 5 goals depending on the length of your race. So here we have the 100 fly. I have 2 process goals. For the 500 free, I have 5, 1 for each 100. But you could break the 500 up into 200, 200, 100, or however you wanted to, whatever works for you. If you want to take it a step further, you can take a process goal and turn it into what we call a performance cue, which is just a simplified version of the process goal. So for example, instead of thinking 6 kicks off every wall, you might think 6 kicks or 6 power kicks. So a few cautions about process focus. You can turn process focus into a threat if you're looking at it in terms of success or fail based on that process goal. So you don't want to make it black and white like that. It's also a danger that it can lead to overthinking, where you get caught up in overthinking about the execution, getting obsessed with the details, going over and over it in your minds. You know, we're used to using our minds to solve problems and to produce results, and it works in school and in other areas of our life. But it doesn't really work in the case of sports performance. So peak performance, we know, comes from that hind brain back here, the unconscious brain. It doesn't come from our conscious thinking brain up here. So what you need to do, a tip to avoid overthinking, is instead of thinking about it over and over, is to visualize your race with your process goals incorporated into it, and to want to feel it in your body as you visualize it. This will take you out of that thinking brain and bring you into that more unconscious brain down here. Michael Phelps, again, was the king of visualization. He attributes a lot of his success to his practice of doing visualization regularly. And his coach, Bob Billman, had taught it to him at a very young age, and he used it throughout his career. Speaking of Michael Phelps, we're going to watch a quick clip here where we're talking about how he used a process focus, not an outcome focus.
As you know, it is the 2016 Olympics in Rio, and easily the most decorated Olympic swimmer in the history of the sport is Michael Phelps. And I was listening in on an interview between him and Bob Costas, and Bob Costas asked him a question that directly relates to this topic of outcome and process-focused thinking.
You're a guy who likes closure. You like the chapter to end the way you envision it ending. So suppose in Rio, you do really, really well. But in your last individual event, the 100 fly, you take a silver instead of a gold. Would that haunt you?
So Costas asked a question that, as you can tell, is focused on the outcome. he basically says, Phelps, if you were to go through your final race and you were not to achieve your desired outcome, which of course would be winning gold, would that haunt you? Why I love Phelps's response is because his response immediately shows that he is clearly thinking about the process as opposed to the outcome.
Would that haunt you?
No, because I know I could look back at how I prepared and I would know that I did, and but Bob and I did whatever we could do to prepare ourselves to be the best. So I think now being able to prepare how we have, I'm willing to accept whatever results I get. I mean, sure, will I be ticked off? Probably, but I'll know deep down inside that was the best that I could do that day.
So I just love this response from Phelps because it shows you his mindset. It shows you that he is solely focused on putting in the hard work and dedication that is needed to achieve his goals. He understands that he cannot control the outcome of his efforts. He can simply control the work that he gets done in order to achieve those goals. And it just shows you that he is totally focused on the process. So just to kind of wrap things up, as we've learned today from our homeboy, Michael Phelps, when you are working towards a goal, all you can do, all you can control is putting in the work needed to achieve your desired outcome. So focus on that, focus on the process that is required to achieve your goals, and trust that if you put in the hard work, it will pay off. As you know, it is the 2016 Olympics in
Here we go. So just like Michael Phelps, David Popovich and his coach had developed a great high performance mindset that is process focused. I love how Bob Billman, Michael Phelps' coach, described Popovich's mindset as intense but not tense, which I think is a great thing to aim for because you want to be focused, you want to be ready to go, but you don't want to be tense. Next, we're going to watch a clip of David Popovich talking about his mindset going into Europeans, where he set the world record in the 100 free. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that, but we're going to see if you can spot any of the threat, challenge, perception going on, or any of the process outcome focus.
Look, we talked after the World Championships, and you had a phenomenal championship, but then you decide to go to the European Championships, and I think to myself, okay, it's the end of a long summer. He just swam exceptionally well. He wins world titles, but then you go to another level, dude. What the hell? I mean, how do you take from what you did at the Worlds a couple of weeks later and then go to a whole nother level, including breaking this world record that many people thought could not be broken because it was a suit world record, right? Like, that's the talk. How'd you get better?
What I think I did different from last year, except obviously the better training and being more prepared, I think what I did completely different from last year in terms of having back-to-back competitions, because last year I had European Juniors and then the Olympics, and this year I have 4 of them, these Europeans being the third ones. What was completely different is the fact that I never really put any pressure on myself, and my expectations for this meet, like my own expectations, were simply, okay, let's do it. It's not like I'm feeling the absolute best in training, but I know that once I get there and I get hyped up, I'm gonna be just fine. And so heading from an exceptional meet in Budapest to this one in Rome, it was simply, I went blank. I had no other exterior factors such as social media or really anything else. I just said to myself, okay, let's do what I know best, and hopefully it'll be fast as well. So that was really basically all I did. And like I said, it was different from last year. It was like at the Olympics, I want to get a final. I was very excited. I want to get the best result as possible. Here I went with the thought of mind that even if I don't win, like I just became a double world champion, I'm going to Europeans. Even if I don't win and someone beats me, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
So there are a number of things I want to go through here to point out. So he talked about how this year he did not put pressure on himself or put any expectations on himself. So what's the result of that? He's removing the threat perception. And I think most people in his situation would have been feeling a lot of pressure and the weight of expectations, because a lot of people were watching him very closely this summer to see if he could get that world record. He also mentioned not feeling great in training leading up to the competition. So for a lot of people, that would trigger a threat perception. You know, oh no, what if I don't do well? Because they would project it into the future and assume that their taper is not going to go well. So that would trigger a fear of failure and a loss of confidence. But for Popovich, he doesn't think of it that way. Instead, he says, once I get there, I know I'll be okay. I'll be hyped up. I'll be just fine. So what he's doing is he's trusting in his training, and he's trusting that he will be mentally prepared. And so for him, it is not a threat. He talks about going blank, so he had no social media or other external factors. So again, that's removing that threat perception. He wanted to take away, you know, what everyone else was saying and talking about regarding his swim, so that he could improve his own focus and ignore all that stuff that could set up a threat perception. And then he told himself, okay, let me do what I do best, and hopefully it will be fast as well. So what I think is interesting here is that he did not say, I need to set a world record, I need to win. He didn't say, you know, I'm a double world champion, therefore, if I lose, I'm going to be embarrassed, which I think a lot of people might have felt. Instead, for him, he did not focus on the outcome. He just focused on doing his best and hoping it would come out well. So then he talks about it was different from last year at the Olympics, where he wanted to get a final and he wanted the best result he could get. So he did make the finals at the Olympics. But it's interesting to me that he's talked about how he wanted to change that going into this year. So at the Olympics, he was very outcome focused, that threat focus. This time, he wanted to be more process focused. And of course, he swam amazing. He also talked about going with Europeans. He thought that even if I don't win, I'll be okay, which I thought was really interesting. Again, he's taking away the threat. He's lowering the stress. He knows that he'll be okay no matter what happens. And he relies on that, you know, I'm already a double champion. I don't have to prove anything. I'll be okay. Whereas I think a lot of people would have interpreted that like, I just won worlds. I need to win Europeans too. Otherwise, I'll be embarrassed or people won't think well of me. So this brings up the paradox of letting go. You need to be able to let go of the outcome. The paradox being that in order to do well, you don't want to focus so much on trying to do well. This is probably the hardest part for most athletes. You put in so much work and effort, and it's difficult not to get attached to the outcome. But the truth is, there's a lot of things about outcome that are not within your control. The weather, if you're swimming outdoors or even indoors, the condition of an indoor pool can sometimes be poor. Your competitors and what they're going to do, you have no control over that. There's luck and chance. There's an official being unfair. Even at the short course world championship level, we saw a 50 backstroke final that had to be re-swum because of a malfunction. So things happen beyond your control. And if you attach to the outcome, that can be a really rough road, because sometimes it will be good, but other times it won't be good. So how do you let go of outcome? Most of our goals are outcome-focused goals, and those are great for training. They tell you what pace you need to hit. They tell you, they motivate you to get out of bed and get going, to work harder and push through those sets. But you want to switch your goal when you get to the competition. You want to focus on these 4 things here: giving your best effort, having a positive attitude no matter the circumstances. That 50 free at the short course worlds, or 50 backstroke rather, is a good example of that. Ryan Murphy kept a very positive attitude, whereas Isaac Cooper got very upset about the situation, and Ryan Murphy ended up coming out with the win. You also want to focus on being prepared and ready to go, and on the execution, the process goals. So if you think about why we focus on those 4 things, the key is that those are all things that you can control. So even if you're really wanting to make that futures cut at the meet, try not to think about that. Try to think about these things that are within your control. And most of the time when you do that, when you focus on the things you can control and executing them well, you'll get a great result. Now, there will be days when you'll do those things and you won't get a great result. However, you're able to have that peace of mind knowing you did everything that you could, kind of like Michael Phelps talked about. If he got that silver instead of gold for his last race, he would be pissed off, he would be upset, but he would be at peace underneath. He would know that he did everything he could. So just a quick review of what we've gone over and just kind of a simplified version here. First, ask yourself C or T, outcome or process. And then you want to let go of outcome. You want to focus on those process goals or performance cues. And you want to focus on those 4 things we looked at before: effort, attitude, and being prepared. So now that you have an understanding of threat versus challenge perception and how process versus outcome focus affects that, we're going to look at the final piece, which is the growth mindset. Growth mindset is an overall mindset. It's not just for the competition day. It's really for your whole career. And as you can see, I have some other information and things that we go over, but today we're kind of sticking with these 3 basics, which are really important fundamentals. So growth mindset is the belief that one can improve their skills and abilities through hard work, persistence, and learning. That means every practice, every race is an opportunity for learning and growth. It's seen as a fun challenge where I'm going to do my best and see what happens. It's a very useful mindset, and it results in more successful outcomes, not just in sports, but also in school or work or anything else in your life. It also tends to result in greater satisfaction and enjoyment, and it tends to build confidence. One thing I thought interesting in one of Popovich's interviews is he talked about how he likes to watch movies, find something in the movie he can learn from it, and then apply that to his life. So he's using a growth mindset, not just in regards to swimming, but all across his life. So what is a growth mindset as compared to a fixed mindset? A lot of people think success is just about, what physical attributes the athlete has and their desire to win. But it's also about an athlete being open to improving their skills and to how they deal with mistakes or setbacks, and to not being afraid of failure. Too often the belief is that the athlete simply needs to be that natural talent and then they'll fulfill their potential. However, it's become abundantly clear over the last few years that mindset is a huge part of the outcome. So just a real quick review of the slide here. Someone with a growth mindset believes their talents can be developed and improved. They believe that effort is going to get them there and that mistakes are part of learning. Someone with a fixed mindset believes that there's a fixed amount of talent, that effort isn't going to make that much difference, and that if they fail, it defines who they are. The growth mindset person is going to see failure just as an opportunity, and they're going to see it as temporary, and they're going to embrace challenges and welcome feedback. Someone who's got a fixed mindset is going to not want to look at their flaws or admit to their flaws. They're going to want to avoid challenges because they're scary, and they're going to not want to hear feedback. They might take it quite personally and get upset. They're also going to feel threatened when other people have success instead of viewing it as an inspiration. One of the biggest differences is when things are not going well. Many times people will lose confidence, or they'll even quit when things are not going the way they want. They lose the enjoyment of their sport, and in fact, they lose the chance to see themselves improve. So the key here is to know that improvement is non-linear. The brain is not a computer. You can't just change the program and boom, there you go. You have to change your thoughts, which takes a lot of repetition and practice. So you should expect some ups and downs along the way, kind of like in the CRT videos, he talked about playing tennis and how he would slip back to old habits, the W or L instead of C or T. So you just need to stick with it over time. And as you can see from this graph over here, you're going to improve. It just might not be every single time you race, you improve, but over the course of the season, you'll see improvement. Another great example of the growth mindset is Katie Ledecky. When Bruce Gamel first started coaching her in the fall of 2012, she was already an Olympic gold medalist, but he couldn't believe that she couldn't do 3 unassisted pull-ups or run a 9-minute mile. He had her undergo a battery of physical assessment tests at the U.S. Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. According to Gamel, the OTC report referred to her as remarkably unremarkable on those physical assessments. It was her attitude that made all the difference, seeking to improve each day, each race, with no fear of failure. So right now we're going to do a quick mental exercise, and let me check the time and see how we're doing. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because we're running a little low on time, but I want you to imagine that you're swimming the anchor on a 4x100 free relay, and it's a really close race with the team next to you. Try to use all 5 of your senses to make it as real and vivid as possible. So the sights, the sounds, the smells, the sensations in your body, the emotions of being at that swim meet, being about to step up and swim the anchor leg. The goal of this exercise is not to do it perfectly. I know some perfectionists out there are probably trying to do it perfectly. The goal here is to learn more about how you think and view competitive situations. So just take a moment, maybe jot them down or make a mental note, and try not to censor yourself. Don't try to do it right. Just honestly capture what your thinking is like. I'll just give you a few seconds. Okay, hopefully that was enough. We're going to look at what it might look like if you had a threat, outcome, or fixed mindset. You might feel like your ability is on the line and that you need to prove yourself because you're judging yourself based on how you perform. And you're worrying that others are going to judge you too. If you win, that means you're a good swimmer. If you lose, then you're a bad swimmer. You might feel like everyone's eyes are on you, that there's a lot of pressure. You might have a lot of doubts. You might feel anxious. In contrast, if you have a challenge, process, or growth mindset, you're probably seeing it as fun. You're enjoying the challenge. You enjoy pushing yourself and testing yourself. Michael Phelps loved relays at the Olympics. He loved being in the finals with the excitement of the crowd, and he really shined a lot at on those relays because he was enjoying it. He saw it as a challenge. So now you have an understanding of threat versus challenge perception and how process versus focus outcome affects that, and an understanding of the value of a growth mindset. So now we're going to go over reviewing the points that you want to keep in mind when you're at a swim meet. If you're there and you're feeling anxious, ask yourself, C or T, am I in my optimal zone? Am I thinking in black and white terms? Am I focused on outcome? Am I afraid of some outcome? Then you want to make sure you have a process focus. You want to look at that technique and strategy that you want to incorporate into your race, but you don't want to overthink about it or make it into a threat. Instead, you want to visualize yourself performing the race and executing excellently and feel that in your body. Next, you want to let go of outcome. If you think back to Michael Phelps' interview, we saw how he let go of outcome, whether he got gold or silver, and focused on process. Now, of course, he wanted the gold, but he understood that that's all you can do. Another person who had this understanding is Anthony Irvin, pictured here. Anthony Irvin won the gold medal in the 50 free at the 2000 Olympics. Then he retired from swimming for a few years. Then he came back, and at age 35, he won gold in the 50 free at the Rio Olympics 16 years later. So I'm going to read you a quote from him, and he uses the word expectation, but when he says that, he means his expectation for the outcome. Having an expectation for a result is meaningless. It can only work against you. Expectations are meaningless for 2 reasons. First, expecting a result you don't have any control over is pointless. Second, you can't ask any more of yourself than your best effort. And if you're expecting something that's greater than or less than your best effort, that's equally as pointless. And then finally, the 4th step is about growth mindset and what's called continuous improvement. So the way to get better is to have continuous improvement step by step, and there's really no shortcut. You need to put in the work. A focus on continuous improvement is a systemic way to advance, seeking improvement over time. It also builds your confidence as you see yourself improving regularly, and that makes the process more enjoyable and builds confidence. And in sports today, which are so competitive, it is those who are going to keep learning and improving who are going to come out on top. And then just one last quick note, mental health also matters for peak performance. And if you feel like you're struggling with depression or anxiety, eating disorders, burnout, or chronic stress, please make sure you work with a professional. And now we have a little time for question and answer. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't think so, son. I think you cover a lot of it. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure, I'm glad you liked it.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I can't see myself. Okay, there you go. Yeah. No, that was amazing. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not in a room full of people here. But that was great. Thank you so much. I think I don't see any questions on the chat
Okay.
feature, and I don't have questions here.
Okay, well,
But,
if people think of questions and they want to message me on Instagram or anything like that, feel free.
yeah, they have it. And I realize I misspelled it on my email. But you can see it right there, guys. You can see it's Muller Sports Psych on Instagram. It's a really, really good page. I read it all the time.
Oh, thank you.
But again, thank you so much. And we can't wait for part 2 that I think I can't remember the date right now, but it's on the email that I sent it. But yeah, guys, if you logged in, thank you for logging in. Again, I recorded this in case you missed anything, and I will be sharing it with everybody. Okay?
All right, well, thank you for having me.
No problem. All right.
Bye.